Hello and welcome to another episode of Cascadia Mountain Weather. My name is Kyle McCrone. I'm here with Wyatt Mullen, and today is Thursday, February 15th, 2024. And this is a picture Wyatt took last weekend in the Swattle River Valley. So that's kind of in the north central Cascades in the Darrington area. And there was basically no snow or no base snow up to 4,000, 4,500 feet, which is what we've seen during this warm El Nino winter. But there was a fresh dusting of snow down to 2K. And freezing levels have been pretty low actually the last few days. So we've gotten light snow really down to the lowlands recently. This is the 72-hour snowfall map up to today, basically. And the first thing you might notice is that there was some snow, like pretty low, down in the Tacoma area, the I-5 corridor towards Portland, eastern Washington, down near the Tri-Cities and stuff. So we did have, almost kind of a almost Seattle lowland event. But what also is interesting about this map is the snowfall pattern, like what areas got snow. So notice how the Eastern Olympics got a lot of snow and the Western Olympics, which are like the wettest place in the state, got very little. The North Cascades, which traditionally have more snow, got basically nothing out of the storm. The Southern Cascades got a lot. So what happened is we had this colder system. We had like moisture coming up from the south, and it kind of wrung itself out over the Oregon Cascades mostly, and maybe the southern slopes of the Olympics a little bit. And not much moisture made it north of Snoqualmie Pass. And because it's moving south to north, it's not going to be a very big precipitation maker along the west slopes of the Cascades. But a unique portion of this storm is that unique effect is that it actually dumped quite a bit of snow in the Wenatchee Mountains, which is one of the driest parts of the Cascades. They're very far east, so they're heavily rain shadowed. However, because this storm was going northward, it hit this east to west mountain range, the Wenatchees, and actually dumped almost a foot of snow. It dumped more than shown in this graphic at Mission Ridge and Blue Pass. So the Eastern Olympics got a lot of snow from strong easterly winds from the high pressure in eastern Washington. So we've had really strong winds the last few days, some places like 60, 70 miles per hour. And then those winds are driven up slope on the Eastern Olympics and have dumped quite a bit of snow. So really an interesting snowfall pattern, and the typical places you might think get more snow or are good for skiing aren't necessarily. So we have an interesting setup going into this weekend. This is the SNOTEL map, so showing snow depth. And it really, percentages haven't changed much in the last week. We've picked up snow in the last week in most places, but just about enough to hold steady where we are. Still a lot less in the north in the Olympics than the Southern Cascades and east of the crest.
So going into the forecast for this weekend, we're going to start with the freezing levels, because this does a decent job of showing kind of precipitation and freezing levels. So this weekend is going to be still a little bit some uncertainties, but we'll see a couple of weak systems coming through at times. There's a pretty strong system that's going to be offshore, that's going to be throwing some bands up, especially towards the Olympics on Saturday. Friday should be a beautiful day. And then Sunday's probably going to be your best day to see precipitation. Once again, more to the south than really to the north. And Monday should dry out, if it doesn't really clear out so much. So you can see that right now, freezing levels are pretty close to the surface. And overnight, we should see freezing temperatures all the way down to the lowlands. As the sun comes up, we're starting to get into late winter, mid-February. And you can see that we get pretty high rising of the freezing levels during the day. Then they drop down again at night, and then they rise again during the day. So we're going to kind of see that pattern without too much precipitation, maybe a little bit towards the south. And then as we get later into next week, we're going to see more standardizing kind of around 3,000 to 4,000 feet with slight chances of precipitation. This is another kind of hint showing that this is looking at those at kind of the west central Cascades. So pretty low down in the morning, kind of surface level, 1,000 feet, and then up to about 3,000 to 4,000 feet during the day as the sun comes out on Friday. And then Saturday will be a little bit cloudier, and then we'll start to see some precipitation moving in. So we can see that here. This is the 3-hour precipitation coming from the American model, the WRF GFS. And you can see that this is kind of Saturday. We have some precipitation hanging around. Saturday will probably be not like particularly wet, but there will be clouds, maybe some upper level clouds to the north, maybe some clouds hanging around the peaks to the south. We'll take a look at that in a second. Olympics should be seeing precipitation for most of the day on Saturday, so just be aware of that if you're headed out there. And then you can see on Sunday morning, so this is 4 a.m. Sunday, that's really when, that's probably going to be the wettest and the cloudiest day of the weekend. And then as we get into Monday, so this is kind of Monday morning, there's the chance for showers, but we might also see some sun breaks as well. This is looking at the clouds. So right now it's clear over most of the area. This is about 10 p.m. on Thursday. And you can see that much of Friday is going to be pretty sunny, and we'll start to see some high clouds move in from the system that's rotating pretty far offshore. And then as we get into Saturday, those clouds will thicken, but you still might get some sun breaks. And then Sunday, like I said, is probably going to end up being the cloudiest day. And here's just another example from the European model showing these clouds moving in Friday night into Saturday and hanging around throughout the Cascades through Saturday and especially into Sunday. Looking at temperatures, it's going to be pretty close to average, maybe a touch warmer as we get later into the weekend. But in the lowlands, probably upper 40s to around 50, which is basically average right now. In the mountains, tomorrow will be cooler, and then we'll see a gradual warming trend, maybe into the mid 30s at the kind of at the pass levels, with that slightly rising freezing level. At the upper elevations, it's going to be like low 30s, upper 20s. And then the other big story, and probably the biggest weather story of the weekend, depending on where you end up going, is going to be the wind. And so what we have right now, so this is going, so basically we're going to have this storm that's pretty far off. It's actually even off this map, off the Washington coast to the left. And then we have high pressure that is settling in over the Columbia Basin in eastern Washington. And so these lines that you see cutting across the Cascades are lines of constant pressure, or isobars. And as we go into the weekend, and especially as we go through tomorrow, and especially tomorrow night, we're going to see pretty strong gap winds cutting through. So they're going to be easterlies blowing from eastern Washington to western Washington, where there's higher pressure eastern, lower pressure western Washington, and especially through the gaps. And you can see that these are pretty dense, pretty thick lines that are close together, and that suggests high winds. We can look at windy to see some of these winds, and you can see that this is kind of that area where that low elevation, where the low drop, that gap in the Cascades is near Snoqualmie Pass, and then up here is near Stevens Pass. And as we go forward on Friday, you can see that these winds are gradually increasing, and they actually might get pretty high, like gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour plus, especially once you get towards like the lower elevations of those gaps, but it will also be at the pass. So just be aware of that, but it also should be pretty localized. Like you'll see it along the eastern kind of side of the crest and also along the western side, but like North Cascade should avoid it. It'll be quite strong through the Strait of Juan de Fuca as well. So just be aware of that, although Hurricane Ridge will likely won't feel too much the brunt of that. Those winds should continue through Saturday, but as we get into Sunday, they should diminish. There's a wind advisory currently, so you can see this from the National Weather Service, possibly 50 to 60 mile an hour gusts, and that goes through 10 a.m. Saturday. We'll skip that for now, and this is a graphic by the National Weather Service. And you can see that as we go through Friday, those winds are really going to be picking up. Here's I-90 right here. There's Seattle and Clayel, and you can see it's really strong kind of in that east side of the Puget Sound. So now I'm going to pass it off to Kyle to talk more about kind of snow conditions on the trails and on the mountains.
Thanks, Wyatt. So we've gotten a variable amount of fresh snow. Some places more like Paradise, looking at closer to 1.5 to 2 feet. So they naturally have a considerable, a little bit higher avalanche danger. Places up north have gotten less fresh in the last few days, but some earlier this week. One thing we wanted to highlight is some interesting layers that are going on in the snowpack. So this is the Stevens Pass forecast, which is generally, moderate, not crazy concerns, but what people are seeing is some faceting around the early February crust, or EFC, as they're saying in NWAC. So facets are weak layers in the snowpack, and they often lead to avalanches in the future when like heavier snow or more cohesive snow sits up on top of it. So right now there's not like a ton of snow on that faceted layer, but it is a little concerning that it's having this time to facet, and we could see that layer wake up, so to speak, and start causing more avalanches as we get more fresh snow piling up on top of it. Our warmer temperatures next week might help with healing in that snowpack some, but this is something that we definitely have to track and have on the back of our minds as we think about getting out in the backcountry. So over the last week, we've actually gained a decent amount of snow in most places. Paradise, probably got the most, a little over 2 feet in the last 7 days, but each ski area increased in snow depth. So that's great to see. Long term, the forecast is looking a little more promising than it has been. So towards the end of February, there does seem to be a decent amount of model consensus that's calling for colder and stormier weather. So it's still, at least 10 days out. So don't get too excited. Things can definitely change, and we've been disappointed before this year, but it is something to keep our eyes on, and we can definitely hope for the best. Finally, we'd like to say thank you to all of our Patreons that support us. So these individuals get access to exclusive recreation recommendations every Thursday evening, where we go a little more in depth, looking at what day to get out, what zone to check out, what types of activities. So if that kind of information interests you, we encourage you to check out our Patreon. You can reach it at cascadiamountainweather.com. We also will have a link to it in the show notes. So thank you very much to all of our patrons, and thank you to everyone for listening. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, and we hope you have a great holiday weekend.